Hi, I'm Pedro da Silva working for the organization's team, and I want to compare today two different approaches to the sign in experience depending on what we are going to support in the first iteration for organizations with Protocells. So let's start with the proposal 2 here on the side, which is the more minimal. And it effectively, there is no difference for the user experience. So the user won't feel anything, but what we will do in the backend is understand if the username, in this case the email, matches an organization and is part of an organization. We do all of that handover in the backend to sign the user into the organization. So for them, they will land on this page, the usual sign in page that we have on GitLab.com. They type in their username, password, or even they can use a passkey or other single sign on options, and they do the regular login, right? And so, just based on that, then we would determine, have logic, if they belong to an organization, and if so, they will be driven to the appropriate landing page with the right scope. So either the default or the organization which they're assigned to, right? And in this case, this can be possible if we don't have any authentication options or restrictions at the org level. So, for example, organizations can't say that they're going to enforce two-factor authentication, or they cannot say we will enforce single sign-on SSO. If they don't have any of those options, and if all of the authentication options come from the user, so for example, the user enabling two-factor authentication on their end, or using passkeys or a service sign-in, then they will go through the additional authentication. But this is not dependent on organization at all because those settings come from the user and not the organization. The other option is when we are able to give organizations right from the start some authentication options and restrictions, and that will force us to have potentially a different experience. So again, it all depends on what settings are needed. To give you an example, if the organization enforces, the only option is to enforce two-factor authentication, and there are no other authentication options or restrictions at the organization level, then we can still keep this experience, right? Because the only difference is that regardless of how they sign in with password, with passkey, with service sign in, they will go through the additional authentication screen for 2FA, and then we'll move into the organization. But if we say, no, the organization is actually going to be able to set a specific single sign-on and an identity provider, or they're going to say, oh, we're going to enforce no passwords, so people can only sign in with single sign-on, then we're going to need a different experience, which is what we've been exploring in the past, but with a few changes. So here, immediately, what you can see in this proposal is that we are going to say here at the top, sign in to gitlab.com, which will change this heading when you're signing into a specific organization. So in this case, we only ask for the username or email. Then the user presses continue, or if they want, they can immediately select the passkey or one of the single sign-on options, which in this case, if they just click on this without entering their email, they go straight to the additional authentication, which in this case is going to be the passkey or two-factor authentication if needed, or a single sign-on, and then they go into the landing page. So in this case, they don't go through any of the organization sign-in pages. They just go straight from the global sign-in because they press one of these buttons and they go into the appropriate landing page, whether that is the default or another organization. If they do enter a password, they will go into this step where they have the email filled, and if the user belongs to an organization, they can click on the continue button and they go to the organization sign in, right? If they do not belong to an organization, we basically keep them on the screen, but just show the password field. I'm going to demonstrate how all of this works in a prototype. But essentially, we detect based on their email whether they belong to an organization, and if they don't, they are still on this page, and we display the appropriate options for them. And then finally, when they're in the organization sign in or in the global sign in with the password, they can sign in, do any kind of additional authentication if needed, and then they go into the landing page. So to show you how this behavior works, I have this prototype here, which is configured to only accept a specific email address that maps to our organization. So in this case, if I type in pedro@gmail.com, so it detected that this email address is not associated with an organization, and it displays the password field, right? I could also have, just clicked on Google, which would move me into the Google single sign-on page, used my Gmail address there, and then entered, GitLab.com. So to do that again, so if I do something like this, it pauses to see if this username or email belongs to an organization. In this case, it doesn't, so I can enter my password or do the single sign-in. And another option is if I type in user@org.com, it detects that this email is associated with an organization, so it does not display the password field. And again, this is going to be also dependent on what organization settings we enable. But to do this again, so when they enter this page, if I type in an email address that is associated with an organization, it might not show the password field, and I click on continue, and it moves me into the organization's specific sign-in page with the appropriate options. So they might have a specific sign-in methods that they want to enable for the user. They might not even have the password, right? So if we have, for example, the option to enforce single sign-on right from the first iteration, this field here of password is not even going to be displayed because the organization does not allow using that. So this is to say that it's all dependent on what kind of single sign-in methods and restrictions we're going to allow. But I'm assuming that from the start, we're not going to have any of this. So we might actually be able to have a more minimal, change for the users where they don't feel anything in the user experience, and we just do all of the logic in the backend to move them into the organization. So this was a quick walkthrough. Feel free to take a look at the Figma that has more notes and leave a comment in the issue. Thank you so much.